AWAKEN, the SHADOWMAN, directed by J.S. Wilson. This story here features this mysterious shadowy figure that we've seen crop up in a few times before, at least we think we had. This SHADOWMAN is generally kind of associated with sleep paralysis, but I can never say that damn word, paralysis. Anyway, this film has nothing to do with that. Instead it focuses on a guy who has a call from his brother, and it turns out his mother has gone missing, played by Jean Smart. And so he kind of goes to this kind of this town where he meets up with his brother, who's a little bit sort of estranged from. They have a bit of a tragic past, and that they kind of obviously have fallen out over. And here he kind of seems to get involved in this kind of strange cult-like group called the Gateway, which seems to be like where all of the kind of the town is kind of seemingly involved with, and they seem a little bit weird. After that, you have this kind of mysterious, shadowy figure that seems to be taking interest in his family, particularly their young baby, and that's your story. So what do I think about AWAKEN, the SHADOWMAN? I've got to say this has some good bits in it, so let's talk about them first of all. The most standout thing for me is some of the use of visual effects. So this SHADOWMAN himself looks pretty good, and they've actually been quite clever in the way that they've used him, in the fact that they've used both kind of digital effects and then simply a tall, skinny guy in a black body stocking. Obviously kept to the kind of the shadows for the most part, but it works. And there's scenes there where we have, you know, someone just comes into the room and there's this weird shadow man literally just standing in the corner. Looks genuinely disturbing. So some of the kind of the imagery and the things that actually feature the Shadow Man do seem very well made, and I've got to say work really, really well. And I have to say the central premise of this movie is actually quite intriguing as well. The kind of the story where this kind of adult guy is trying to kind of in search for his kind of like elderly mother or somewhat elderly mother, you know, with his kind of estranged brother. It's not the kind of the typical setup that you've seen in a lot of these films. And the premise here is quite good. I also quite like the score. It does remind me a little bit of John Carpenter sort of style score to it as well. However, this movie is somewhat deceiving because the SHADOWMAN himself really takes a back seat to the more central story of this weird kind of cult group of people that just seem kind of overly friendly and really are the focus of the film. And I've got to say, it's not a strong enough plot to carry this film through, particularly as I don't think the acting is particularly fantastic from some of the cast. I think the main male lead is actually quite good, but there are some supporting characters here that just seems a little bit too trying too hard to be quirky and things like that. So I didn't feel the acting was particularly good, and just a little bit too obvious in places, I suppose. The kind of the leader of this kind of this cult, it's just like, check me out, I'm really weird, and I don't know, it doesn't really kind of ring true to me. The story ends up being a little bit slow, a little bit dull in the end, and like I said, when the SHADOWMAN sort of does show up on screen, it does pick up and it looks great, but I don't feel like he was really part of the story very much until right at the end. And even then, you could have had the same story essentially without the SHADOWMAN being in it, and just had a weird kind of like cult of people, and you could literally take the SHADOWMAN out of the story and it really have not affect the story all that much at all. So ultimately this film was a little bit disappointing. I thought they could have done more with the actual SHADOWMAN character himself, rather than just being this kind of peripheral figure that doesn't really seem to have a lot to do with it. And there's a kind of a subplot as well, that with these kind of like group of biker types that doesn't really go anywhere. It's more of, I guess it's a red herring, but it just seems to stretch out this kind of running time and have more family drama and stuff like that. Anyway, ultimately disappointing, this film. I'm going to have to say this film was a 4 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.